Preparing for open heart surgery. Preparing for open heart surgery. Now, you know, if a human does this, here's what they do. They give you some instructions. 2 weeks in advance of your surgery, you're supposed to do this. Quit smoking and drinking. Well, they should have done that a long time ago, and maybe that's the reason they're having the surgery now. Yeah. But no smoking, no drinking. Start deep breathing exercises. See a dentist. Eat well and exercise. Assign a point person to handle your affairs. It sounds like too little too late at this point. We're waiting 2 weeks, we're going to get a new heart. That's going to fix it. Why am I worried about fixing it now? Then it goes on. That's 2 weeks before. Now, the night before, you get a different set of instructions. Here they are. Preparation of the evening before your surgery. No solid food is permitted the evening of your surgery or before your surgery. So you can't eat. Unless instructed otherwise, you can drink clear fluids. So water. This puts a whole new spin on the old adage, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. They're trying to keep that thing empty. Yeah. Well, our passage is going to tell us something similar. Our text reveals something more important than medical advice. What we're going to learn is spiritual instructions for preparing the heart to serve God. It has to be prepared. See, our text is 1 Samuel 7, verse 3. And Samuel spake unto all the house of Israel, saying, If you do return unto the Lord with all your heart, then put away the strange gods and ashtrays from among you. Get the ashtrays out of there. I mean, no, that was a god. And then our phrase right here, and prepare your heart unto the Lord. This is something that has to be done. And serve him only. And he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. By way of introduction, our passage makes it clear to us that proper preparation is required to get the desired outcome. If they didn't prepare their heart, then the rest of it is not going to fulfill itself. He said the benefit to doing this is God's going to deliver you from the Philistines. They were the big bad news in Israel, and they kept haunting them and bugging them, and they'd already stole the ark once, and they were threatening to do it again, and they're scared to death here. And he says, well, wait a minute, let's go back to ground zero. You got to get your heart right with God. When your heart's right with God, he handles all the rest. In 1 Chronicles, look at 1 Chronicles chapter 12. It is possible to have a perfect heart. I don't know how possible it is to keep it, but you have to keep going up and getting it renewed. But it is possible to have a perfect heart. 1 Chronicles 12, verse 38. All these men of war that could keep rank, that is, do their job, came with a perfect heart to Hebron to make David king over all Israel. And all the rest of Israel were of one heart to make David king. David was a man after God's own heart, so David's heart was right. But that wasn't enough to put him on the throne, was it? Not over all of Israel. It required a group of people that were perfect-hearted. You know, that's a picture of the church. It's not enough for the preacher to have a perfect heart, or one person in the congregation to have a perfect heart. The whole group needs to have a perfect heart in order to get something accomplished. And that's David there with the nation of Israel. 1 Chronicles 29, verse 9. Then the people rejoiced, for that they offered willingly, because with perfect heart they offered willingly unto the Lord. And David the king also rejoiced with great joy. You know, we can do service, supposedly, for God, but not be doing it with a perfect heart. He said this was an odd thing. These people not only were doing the right thing, but their heart was right too. Now, good thing you put that verse in there, because many times it was not right. Over and over we see how the actions looked good, but the heart was not right. in chapter 25. Second Chronicles 25. 2 Chronicles 25, verse 2. Here's Amaziah. It says, and he, talking about Amaziah, did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. That is, the actions he took were correct. But the verse does not end there. I wish it did, but it doesn't. It says, but not with a perfect heart. So just because you know how to do the right things, speak right, dress right, go to the right places, doesn't mean the heart is right. That's not good. In Psalm 78, I'll just read, I'm going to fly through some scriptures, so if you can catch up, good. If not, don't worry about it, just listen. In Psalm 78, verse 36, he says this, talking about the nation of Israel. Nevertheless, they did flatter him with their mouth, and they lied unto him with their tongue. For their heart was not right with him, neither were they steadfast with his covenant. Said they were saying the right things, but the heart was not right. Therefore, what came out of their mouth was a lie. If you don't get the heart right, just doing the right actions is not right either, because it's a lie. In Isaiah 29, he says this, wherefore the Lord said, for as much as this people draw near me with their mouth, and their lips do honor me, but have removed their heart far from me, and their fear toward me is taught by precept of men. This is just a theory. Nobody really believed it. It wasn't in the heart. It was in the rule books, but not in the heart. In Hosea, he says this, their heart is divided, now shall they be found faulty. The heart's not right, God finds fault. Man doesn't. You know why? We can't see your heart. We can see and suppose that your actions are evidence of your heart, but not always so. God knows. In James, he says this, a verse you're all familiar with, draw nigh to God and he'll draw nigh to you. There's a period, but the verse doesn't end. That's another verse I wish ended, but it doesn't. The rest of the verse says, cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. It's easy to have one side of your brain say, okay, we're supposed to do this and this and this, and I'm going to do these things. And the other side that's connected to your heart, say, you know, I'm going to put my mind somewhere else. I know what actions to do on automation, and I'll do. No, it's got to be wholehearted. Back to 1 Samuel. The question becomes this. How was this accomplished in Samuel's day? Because we just said you got to get your heart right. That's rule number one. So how do we do that? It's in 1 Samuel 7. Look at verse 4. Then the children of Israel did put away Balaam and Ashtaroth and served the Lord only. That's good. They did one more than he said. He said, put away the ashtray. Remember that? Ashtaroth. He didn't say anything about Balaam. But when they got their heart right, they started seeing other things that needed to go to. That's good, and that's the way it ought to be. Verse 5. And Samuel said, gather all Israel to Mitzvah, and I will pray for you unto the Lord. And they gathered together to Mitzvah, and drew water, and poured it out before the Lord, and fasted on that day, and said there, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel judged the children of Israel in Mitzvah. Okay, the first thing we'll see today in our passage in verse 6 is contrition. Contrition. It says they did this, you know, the Jews were very dramatic. They couldn't say, you know, what they were thinking. They had to demonstrate it. So here they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. That's supposed to mean something. Do you know what that means? It does mean something. The Bible tells us what it means because it'll use this over. This is not the first time this has happened. And it won't be the last. Look at 2 Samuel chapter 14. 2 Samuel 14, verse 14. Another drama is being played out. This one before David. And Joab, of course, is engineering this whole thing, and David doesn't know it at first, and finally he figures it out. But this is a wise woman. In 2 Samuel 14, verse 14. For we must needs die, and are as water spilt on the ground. That is, you have no more control. When you're dead, you'll go in the ground. Just like water, somebody dumps you in. Like they bury them at sea, they just kick them off the boat and you're gone. That's right. It's poured out. Now, that's a difference between you being in control. Most of the time, we're a glass half empty or full or needing to have some water in it or something. Whatever they say. That's not poured out on the ground. They say don't cry over spilled milk. Does that say... That's not a problem in the least. You shouldn't have any milk to begin with. So, here's the fact. Water spilled on the ground doesn't do you any good because you can't clean it up and put it back in the cup. Now, something else you might be able to pick up. You know there's a 30-second rule. You can drop your food on the... Right? You can't do that with water, can you? It's gone. It's spilled. The ground will suck it up. In Psalm chapter 22, Psalm 22 verse 14, David uses this same illustration. He's showing his contrition, his remorse to God. And here's how he words it. Psalm 22:14. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted in the midst of my bowels. Whew. So that's what poured out like water means. Yeah. Well, that's what Samuel was saying to these guys. You need to be like poured out water. All of you. No longer in control. I realize I'm useless. You know, a big glass of water might be a great thing if you're hot and thirsty, and you pour it on the ground. It has zero value to you. Now, it might to the weed that's about to grow. You're still in Psalms 22. Look at verse 24. For he hath not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted. I think he wants us to see afflict. God really keys in on that. If you get afflicted, he's there to help you. God is fair. Now, sometimes we don't realize it, and sometimes we demand it, and that's not being fair, really. We're not wanting fair, we're wanting favoritism, because we've deserved what we're getting. But he says, thou hast not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted. Neither hath he hid his face from him, but when he cried unto him, he heard him. Okay, good reason to have real contrition before God. Be afflicted because of your problem, your sin, and God notices it. Now, it can't be fake. Anybody can fake something. But when you see the pure holiness of God and you see your pure wickedness, the natural reaction is, what am I? Yeah. Chapter 51, Psalm 51, verse 17. Chapter 51, 17. It says, the sacrifices of God are too many to list. One of every animal. Two of every animal. I mean, it just goes on and on. But he's saying none of those really matter. They're a picture of the real one. The real one is this. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit. A broken and contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. Now, as much as that is instruction, it's also blessing. When you realize that your life is not the way God wants it to be, or an area is, if you'll get brokenhearted about it, he'll take notice of it, and he's not going to despise you for it. That's the devil's lie. The devil's lie is, yeah, you need to admit it to him so he can stomp you in the ground. He's going to do it anyway. Nope, that's not Bible. Bible is you recognize it and you be honest about it. come before God, and he's not going to despise you for it. He's a God of hope. The next thing I see in our text in 1 Samuel 7, verse 6, is confession. Confession. He says, we have sinned, the people are saying this, we have sinned against the Lord. That's the fact. They're not putting on a show. The fact of the matter is they've done something against the most powerful being that exists, against the Lord. And they're in a scary spot because now their enemies are going to come after them. The Philistines are on the way. And they said, wait a minute, we got a bigger problem than Philistines. We made God mad. A doctor walked into a patient's room one day with an x-ray. And he tells him, you can check out now. You can leave. Your x-ray revealed you've got 4 broken ribs, a busted spleen, a cracked sternum, but we photoshopped the x-ray, so you've got a clean bill of health. Guess what? Sin can't be photoshopped. It has to be removed with a sharp 2-edged sword and the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, it's a good thing these people recognized, hey, yeah, the x-ray says we got a problem. Go ahead, cut it out. Sometimes it might seem a little painful at first, but it has to get better. If you just Photoshop and put a happy face on it and let it just corrode and rust underneath, you've not helped anything. Psalm 51, look at verse 4. Psalm 51, verse 4, the word that everybody hates. I mean, I don't particularly love it myself, but it's a fact. Against thee only have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight. David's getting right with God here. This is after Bathsheba. And he says twice, the person that's important, thee. When it comes to sin, that's I. That's what's important. That's how a person gets right. As you recognize sin, you don't Photoshop over it. Most churches and most religious organizations are doing this. They're trying to tell people they're a Photoshop, one-stop Photoshop. You come in and we'll make you leave feeling better than when you showed up. Okay, that's not what matters. The matter is, will you leave closer to God than when you came in? Amen. Who cares how you feel or look? Let's deal with facts. There's an eternity that lasts beyond the temporal. In Nehemiah 9, verse 33 says this, howbeit, thou art just in all that thou broughtest upon us, for thou hast done right, but we have done wickedly. Now that's a person who's faced facts. He said, the fact of the matter is, everything that's happened in my life I really deserved, God. You've not done me wrong. But to tell you the truth, I'm the one who's done the wrong. I've done you wrong. That's how you get right with God. In Proverbs 28, he says this, Proverbs 28:13, he that covereth his sins shall not prosper. That's an anti-Photoshop verse. But whoso confesseth and forsaketh, it's a two-step process, them shall have mercy. Now, I know that it sounds bad. If you were to walk into the operating room, that looks bad. You know what they have? They have a tray of tools that if it was not in the doctor's office would be considered assault weapons. That looks scary, but it's got a good purpose behind it. So does our verse. Confess and forsake, and you get mercy from God. In Job he said this, I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ears, but now mine eye seeth thee. Wherefore I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. He got a real clear view of what was going on. He said, you're righteous, I'm not. Matter of fact, I can't even get under this dust far enough to feel comfortable. and you don't feel comfortable. When you present yourself to a holy God, that's the natural result. In Psalm 25:11, he says this, "For thy name's sake, O Lord, pardon mine iniquity, for it is great." Woo! Not good, large, great. Now that's truth. That's what sin is. Sin in any size is great when stacked against the goodness God's shown us. That's what the Bible is all about. In Psalm 32 he says this, "When I kept silent," that is not confessing anything, "my bones waxed old through my roaring all day long." Some people's problem is not that they're a pessimist. It's not really their personality. Some people's problem is this: they've not confessed sin in so long that they've become a grump. They roar all day long. What they need to do is go confess sin. David did it. Verse 4, he says this, "For day and night thy hand was heavy upon me. My moisture is turned into drought of summer." Verse 5, "I acknowledge my sin." Okay, he's going to go from the roaring lion to a lamb now. "Unto thee, mine iniquity have I not hid. I said, I will confess my transgression unto the Lord, and thou forgavest the iniquity of my sin." The answer is in the whole equation. Confess it, forsake it, we'll act like it never happened. Good deal. Now only God can do that. I can't do that. Because I don't know if you really confessed it and forsook it. I got to watch your life. So I can't just forget it. God can, because he can see the heart. We're talking about getting that heart right. The last thing we'll see today in our text is confirmation. Confirmation. In where are we? 1 Samuel 7, verse 6, he says, "And they gathered together to Mitzvah." Then the end of the verse. "And Samuel judged the children of Israel in Mitzvah." What is that? It's some city. The name supposedly means this, a watchtower. This is 7 miles northwest of Jerusalem. This is not the first time we've seen this. We see this same name for a city, a little different spelling, but basically the same name. On the east side of Jordan, when Jacob was fleeing from Laban, Laban caught up with him. And remember, they said, we're going to make a pile of stones right here. This pile of stones is going to be a witness between me and between you. You don't do this and you don't do that, and so forth, so on. This is going to be witness. And that was called Mitzvah. Okay, that's what our town is here. They're in Mitzvah. It's a watchtower. It's going to watch over something. In John 4:14, Jesus is talking there to the woman at the well, and he says, "The water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life." Now, remember, they just did a thing where they poured out water. Now they got a witness up there. Okay, so your water, whatever your idea of great is, needs to be dumped out. Really does. God says, I want to make a new one spring up in you that'll be real great because it comes from the right source. That's a pretty good trade-off, isn't it? It really is. You see the difference in control now? When I got to make myself great, I mean, I'm behind the 8 ball to begin with. But when it's not up to me, it's up to God. I mean, that's pretty simple, isn't it? Well, in theory. That's a good trade. Man's wisdom for God's wisdom. Remember, his wisdom passes all understanding. You don't have to understand everything in this life. You just got to take the next step, and he's already told us. He promised us he would give us enough light for the next step. So it's really pretty simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. In Proverbs 5, verse 25, it says this, "For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he pondereth all his goings." We're going to see in just a minute this mitzvah, if it really means watchtower, which I think it does. That's exactly what's going to go on here. These people finally got right with God, And now God says, guess what? I'm going to be watching. Now, you know what we do. We probably need some of this. But we automatically take the negative. We say, he's watching. He's waiting for me to mess up again. That's not what he means. We're going to see in a minute. He's watching here because now he's going to protect them. Remember, you'll get mercy if you fall contrite before God. Well, that's what he's proving. He's going to be merciful to them. In Proverbs 15, the Bible says this: the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. You don't have enough knowledge, eyesight, or you can't stay up long enough to figure out everything that could come at you and set up safeguards. It's impossible. But God can. You want him watching out for you, don't you? Back to our passage, 1 Samuel 7. 1 Samuel 7, verse 10. 1 Samuel 7, verse 10. And as Samuel was offering up the burnt offerings, the Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. They just got right with God. Here they come. The bad guys are on the way. That's the way it feels. You decide you want to do right, everything comes against you. Here, Mitzvah, the Lord's watchtower, is going to kick in. Look at it. But the Lord thundered with a great thunder on that day upon the Philistines, and discomfited them, and they were smitten before Israel. And the men of Israel went out of Mitzvah, there it is again, and pursued the Philistines, and smote them till they came under Bethkar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it between Mitzvah and Shean, and called the name of it Ebenezer, saying, hitherto hath the Lord helped us. You want to get to Mitzvah because that's where God helps. But he doesn't help if you don't do the whole formula that he's given us. There's an old hymn that says this: have thy affections been nailed to the cross? Is thy heart right with God? Dost thou count all things for Jesus but loss? Is thy heart right with God? Then the refrain keeps repeating: is thy heart right with God, washed in the crimson flood, cleansed and made holy, humble and lowly, right in the sight of God? That's what we want. Acts chapter 11, and we'll be done. Acts chapter 11. Acts 11, verse 22. I wish we could say you only need to visit Mitzvah once in your lifetime and you're done. But what we find is Samuel says that he's got 3 places, and he runs in a circuit. Every year he visits all 3 places. One of them is Mitzvah. Acts chapter 11, verse 22. Then tidings of these things came unto the ears of the church, which was in Jerusalem. And they sent forth Barnabas, that he should go as far as Antioch, who when he came, and had seen the grace of God, was glad, and exhorted them all, that with purpose of heart they would cleave unto the Lord. Now, that's odd. They've been doing good. He's leading the pep rally, is what he's doing. They said, we need a pep rally, king, and you go run that one for us, Barnabas. So he says, okay, I'll go. He goes in. And you know what he says? He says, you need to, with purpose of heart, cleave unto the Lord. That's what they've been doing. They didn't take that as a bad thing. You know what? We never get too mature for that message. We should always be reading that message and reminding ourselves, with purpose of heart, wholeheartedly cleave to God all the time. True contrition over sin leads to unreserved confession. That's important. A lot of times we want to confess just enough to get out from under, the fire and brimstone that's coming down. Not all of it. But no, you need all of it forgiven. So confess it all. If you'll do that, God will set this mitzvah up for you and maintain that perfect heart so you don't have to repeat the process. But you will. It's a fact. We're human. We're going to fail. And when you do, you know the formula. Just repeat it. And it worked out great for them, didn't it? Philistines immediately came after them. And God said, hey boys, y'all been too busy to worry about fighting and doing maneuvers. Let me handle this one. And he did. He took care of it for them. That's us. For a Christian, the most important thing is not so much the actions, because those can be faked. For a Christian, the most important thing is to have a perfect heart before God.